Canada overtakes the U.S. in vaccinations as the White House slams Facebook over misinformation. And T-minus 4 days until the opening ceremony, and another top U.S. athlete isn't going to the Olympics. Monday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Monday, July 19th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hi, Carlo. Good morning.
Good morning, Jill. How was your weekend?
It was great. How was yours?
It was great. You know, we took your advice. Jill basically demanded that I take advantage of having the in-laws around. So we did, and we put the baby in their care, and Becky and I went out for a cocktail, and it was amazing to be back in the world of the living, even for like an hour. So thank you for making us do that. You
are welcome. I said to you, Carlo, we were texting, and I said, just do yourself a favor, make the reservation, force Becky to go.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need, because it's hard when you're in that bubble. You don't really want to get out. But it is, I'm glad you did.
And you know what? The house didn't burn down.
Exactly.
The baby was fine. No, it was all good.
All right, let's get to some news here. The United States quickly falling behind in the global vaccination race. Canada, which had a slow start, has now officially overtaken the U.S. in terms of percentage of fully vaccinated residents. They're at 70% of partially vaccinated residents compared to 55% of Americans. The EU also catching up after lagging far behind until recently, about 44% of people fully vaccinated there. In the developing world, the picture is grim, though. Just about 1% of people in these low-income countries have been partially vaccinated. Here in the States, some hospitals in under-vaccinated parts of the Midwest and South reactivating their surge plans as the Delta variant drives up hospitalizations, which are back to about 3,000 a day nationally. And deaths are also ticking up to 238 on the 7-day average.
Pretty grim out there, Jill. I think that I think it's safe to say we're in sort of a new wave now, sort of a summer wave. It's not going to look like past waves. I think the question is what's going to happen in the fall and the winter. As the weather cools, more people are going back to work, back to school. All the more reason, I keep saying it, why the FDA really has got to put out this full approval for adults and an EUA for kids as soon as possible, for kids under 12, so that we can at least try to do some vaccine mandates in some places. I think that's really our only hope. You know, I was thinking about this over the weekend. Remember the vaccine card you got when you got vaccinated, 3-4 months ago? They gave you like the little card that you put in your wallet.
Yes.
Has anybody ever asked you to see that?
No.
No, me neither. It's been sitting in my wallet for 3 months now. I mean, it's crazy, right? Even my in-laws, they were coming into Kennedy the other night, and it's they have to be vaccinated. It's the rule to come into the United States, and they are. Nobody asked them for theirs. It's like, what are we doing?
I'm not surprised. There's zero enforcement.
Yeah.
My daughter's teacher had gone to Israel over or a few months ago, maybe over December break or whatever it was, and she came back. And she said she had to fill out all these forms, but then there was no one to give the forms to. So she still has them.
Yeah.
There's zero enforcement. Cases in New York City, by the way, doubled in just the past 2 weeks, driven by Delta. There's some data out of Israel. We know that it is that vaccine effective, but less effective. The Pfizer vaccine, anyway, less effective against the Delta variant. And now, something that's hitting a lot of my friends close to home here is sleepaway camps. There's been cases of COVID at a lot of camps, have had outbreaks, and a lot of camps now canceling visiting day, which was supposed to be next week.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. Yeah. I mean, look, the way I see it, we sort of have two options here. We either let Delta just sort of rip through these under-vaccinated communities, and a lot of these people can hope that there's a hospital bed if and when they need it, or we can just continue to do these like half measures, like bringing back mask mandates in places like Los Angeles where it's not even that bad, and just do that for eternity. I don't know what the other options are at this point.
I mean, a lot of it has to do with this vaccine misinformation and disinformation, which we're going to get to right now. The White House and Facebook engaged in this war of words over vaccine misinformation after President Biden said on Friday that social media platforms were, quote, killing people by allowing falsehoods about the COVID vaccines to spread. Facebook immediately shot back that the president was finger pointing and that 85% of Facebook users in the U.S. either want to or have been vaccinated. And 2 billion people have, quote, viewed authoritative information about COVID and vaccines. The Surgeon General added that whatever Facebook is doing to curb the spread of misinformation is simply not enough.
Certainly no love lost between this administration and Facebook. Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, on Friday causing a little bit of controversy by saying, quote, "You shouldn't be banned from one platform and not others if you are providing misinformation out there," end quote. A lot of people, I think, took that to mean that she was sort of calling for all of these platforms to band together, to ban people that run afoul of their rules, which I don't think would be smart. But I didn't actually see it that way. I saw it as more her saying that it was a little awkward the way she said it, but she was, I thought, meaning like social media bans should be based on the content that people are posting. Anyway, this whole thing doesn't really matter, right? This is like a total whack-a-mole situation. You know, you ban somebody, somebody else pops up. We sort of know it doesn't really work. The White House, though, I think they're trying to make Facebook into a foil. Right, and it's easy. Facebook is the world's easiest foil. Nobody likes Facebook, and nobody, there's no question that they're not helping the cause of vaccinations or anything for that matter. But, this failing it goes far beyond Facebook and social media, I think. And also, it's not just, there's this sort of a narrative, I think, that like these are strictly, Trump people in like deep red MAGA areas that are the vaccine hesitant folks. Obviously the right-wing media ecosystem we've talked about, and it's completely poisonous. But it's not just those folks, right? If you look at the vaccine rates by race, I pulled this from Bloomberg over the weekend, so at least 65% of Asian people in America have been vaccinated. 45% of white people have at least one dose, 40% of Hispanics, 34% of black people. Think about that. We're 7 months in here. 2/3 of black people in America are unvaccinated. I mean, that is an embarrassment. That is a national embarrassment. And not for nothing, but where's Black Lives Matter, right? The Black Lives Matter Foundation raised $90 million last year. Black Lives Matter related groups brought in $10 billion in 2020. Is any of that money going towards vaccination drives that target communities of color? Maybe it is, and I haven't seen. I Googled this and I didn't see anything. So if I'm wrong, somebody please, by all means, tell me and I'll correct myself. But is it, or do those groups only care about police brutality? That's a real question.
Great point, Carlo. And look, just worth mentioning, 99.5% of deaths from COVID-19 in the U.S. right now are people who are unvaccinated. The numbers speak for themselves. So it's kind of like we've all these incentives. I laugh, like, isn't the incentive just not get dying from a disease that you don't need to die from? I mean, you would think that would be enough.
Yes, you would, Jill. And I think that what you said on Friday is probably right, which is a lot of these folks, I mean, they've had the opportunity now, right? So like there isn't really like an excuse like, oh, I can't do it because of work or whatever. I think it's just they don't want to. So if they're not going to do it, they're not going to do it.
And back to just the issue of Facebook and social media really quickly. I have one friend who's actually a big anti-vaxxer, like adamant about, she very, very against vaccines. And she
Not just for COVID, you mean like generally
vaccines
speaking?
In general,
Yeah.
but in particular COVID. And she posts, and instead of writing vaccine or COVID, she just writes with a V. Like that's kind of the workaround. So I guess they have an algorithm. They don't have people who are really combing through all of the posts. They just have algorithms. So, and what is Facebook to do in that regard? Do you know what I mean? Like at a certain, I don't know. It's a tough one. As you say, Facebook is a very easy target, and it's easy to blame them. But when there's a will, there's a way, and people are getting around it.
Exactly.
A shooting outside Nationals Park in D.C. during the Nationals-Padres game on Saturday sent 30,000 fans and players fleeing for cover in the bottom of the sixth inning. No one was injured. Police said the ballpark was not the target. A night earlier, a 6-year-old girl was killed 2 miles away while riding her scooter. These are just two of the dozens of shootings that occurred over the weekend across the country. In Philly, a 1-year-old boy was shot in the leg. In Chicago, 53 people were shot in 41 separate shootings. In Tucson, Arizona, police are investigating a deadly shooting rampage across 3 separate crime scenes. Horrific.
It's out of control is what it is, and it's almost become this sort of sad thing. On Mondays we have to talk about, all of these separate shootings across the country that never really get the attention that they deserve, right? And honestly, the reason for that is most of the time it's among communities of color where this is happening. Naya Courtney, that's the name of the little girl on her scooter who was mowed down on Friday night. She's being remembered as a sassy and quick-witted kindergartner whose life was cut short for really no reason at all. Just one of many victims of this scourge. Several American cities, Jill, outpacing their 2020 homicide rates, which were already up 25% from the year before. Violent crime remains a fraction of what it was in big cities when the murder rates peaked in 1990, but again, it's still a really bad trend, and it needs to be nipped in the bud. And we can't really blame it on lockdowns anymore. I think a lot of us were thinking this time last year, look, this is a cause of the, all of the social upheaval from the pandemic, but that's not really the case.
All right, Carlo, the world's major oil producers have agreed to drastically increase the supply of crude oil over the next 2 years, restoring all of the cuts that they made during the pandemic. The production out of OPEC Plus this weekend will add millions of barrels of oil to the market, which should help lower gas prices that are averaging more than $3 a gallon. Not expected, though, to go down significantly until at least the fall.
Yeah, it'll take some time. It's also what this will do is we'll have the effect of easing inflation, which is important. Gas prices are a huge driver of inflation. This stuff is really tricky politically, right? Because, obviously, we have got to get off of fossil fuels worldwide. That is a habit that we need to kick, and we are in some ways. But at the same time, high gas prices and high oil prices are the easiest way to stall out an economic recovery, right? So you can't just, I could argue that we should just cut, go cold turkey, but you can't actually do that, right? So we have to continue to sort of deal with these fossil fuels for at least a little while longer.
Coco Gauff will be sitting out the Olympics after testing positive for COVID, meaning that the U.S. tennis team will be without its two top stars. We know Serena Williams bailed a couple of weeks ago because she's injured, but previously they were thinking that she wouldn't go because she wouldn't be able to bring her daughter. With less than a week to go until the opening ceremony, at least 3 other people have also tested positive for COVID while staying at the Olympic Village. Thousands of athletes are flying into Tokyo this week for the Games, raising fears that a virus outbreak will be hard to stop once it starts. Organizers are taking measures to keep that from happening, like testing athletes every single day. There is not a vaccine mandate in place for the Games. I was also trying to look and see if Coco Gauff had been vaccinated, but it's unclear. That information is not available.
And she's 17, so she would be eligible, and I guess we won't know. Again, that's another thing, Jill. Where are our athletes, really? Right? Where are our big athletes and telling people to get vaccinated? It's really, it's absurd at this point that people like LeBron James, Coco Gauff, all of these folks that have such big communities and such big followings aren't out there telling people to get their shots. The testing at the Olympic Village, I think that makes sense. What makes a little less sense is, I don't know if you saw this, they're making the athletes sleep on these cardboard beds that can only support the weight of a single person. They say that this is for environmental reasons. I think a lot of people suspect the real reason is to try and keep the hanky-panky at bay, which it's sort of hilarious, right? Because it's here you have the world's most physically gifted human beings all cooped up together for 2 weeks. Pretty sure they're going to figure out ways to hook up without the need for a bed if they decide to do so. Also, this is a little bit of a big deal. Toyota pulling out of advertising during the Olympics in Japan. Toyota is, I think, probably Japan's most well-known company. They are a top corporate sponsor of the Games. So that tells you something, right? If Toyota does not want to be associated with this event, I think a lot of people are prepping for this thing to be just an unmitigated disaster.
Look, the problem is it's the same thing I mentioned about the sleepaway camps. It's you do everything right, but there is a virus out there that's extremely, extremely contagious.
Right.
And even amongst people who are vaccinated, you do have these breakthrough cases, but somebody's getting it from somewhere. I loved the info, though, about the cardboard beds. I thought that was the juiciest.
Did you see these things?
They're hysterical. So an American distance runner, Paul Cellino, he actually tweeted about it, saying these beds are simply meant for one person. It's not about the environment. It is meant to avoid intimacy between athletes. these beds will break if more
Right.
than one person is in them.
Well, also, just the idea of making these people sleep on basically cardboard boxes, like before an Olympic event. I
Seriously.
mean, God.
I mean, they're going to be like, look, I guess we're old or I'm old, but if I have a bad night's sleep or,
Oh, it's
if
over.
I
It's
sleep on an
over.
air mattress even, I can't walk the next day.
Yes, it's over.
And finally, Britney Spears lashing out at her family over the weekend, taking Instagram to blast not just her father, but her sister, Jamie Lynn, for performing her music. Spears called out her so-called support system for failing her over the course of 13 years of that conservatorship, and she wrote that she will not perform as long as her father continues to control her career. Basically like, where have you been, sis?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out about it now. And her sister had put out a statement, by the way, a while ago saying she didn't talk about it because she didn't think that it was her place and
Right.
et cetera.
It's always like kind of like gives me like, I don't know, the willies when people like blast their family in public. But Britney has been posting some really cryptic stuff on her Instagram. There's actually like this whole cottage industry that has sprung up to decode some of these messages. Like there's podcasts about it. Yeah, Becky was telling me
like
about
QAnon.
it. Yeah, exactly, right. But anyway, as far as the conservatorship goes, the next step in this case is there has to be a hearing on whether they can get rid of the dad, and then they have to file. Britney Spears and her lawyers, her new lawyer, has to file a petition to actually end the conservatorship. They have not actually done that yet, so that will end up putting the ball in motion for the judge to finally decide whether Britney can manage her life and her career on her own, which I suspect, I can't imagine she would keep this thing in place, but it's going to take some time. These things are very hard to unwind.
And look, one quick thing. It's funny, there's so much interest in Britney Spears, not to divulge any of our secrets, but it's fun. When we talk about Britney Spears in the podcast and when we write it in the subject, it's the highest,
Yeah.
they're some of our most listened to episodes.
Which is interesting, right? Do people listen to podcasts based on like search terms? I guess they do.
I guess so,
Yeah.
because it does matter. I mean, like this is just some of the information that we get,
Yeah.
once we have our podcast meetings and we go over some of the analytics. And I found that fascinating because I wouldn't have necessarily thought that would be the case. Britney has been kind of out of the spotlight in terms
Yeah.
of her music for so long.
I think a lot of people are following this case because she has just been done so dirty by these people. I think everyone just wants the best for her, right?
And one other quick thing that we want to just mention, we had our live chat on Friday.
Oh yes, I thought it went quite well.
And I loved it. I actually was upset when the podcast was over because it was so fun
Yeah.
to chat with everybody while it was airing, and we kind of talked about the stories, we talked about my rollers or lack thereof. We talked about a million and one things, and it was just great. And we want to just apologize because it's when the podcast ends, it just stops.
Yeah.
So it was like I was like mid typing something,
Yeah.
and then it just kind of goes dark.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes.
So I don't know. We're going to try and figure out if there's a way around it. That might just be how YouTube does it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to do it again on Friday.
Yes.
So we'll mention it Thursday as well. But definitely join. I had a blast, actually.
Yes, it was a lot of fun, and it was a little weird to just. It was sorry to everybody who was talking to us, and then the thing shut off. But hopefully, we'll try and figure out what the problem was there.
All right, everybody. That is what you need to know for Monday, July 19th.
All right, guys. See you tomorrow.